There we go. Now we're good. All right. What does that sound mean, Anthony?
It's Freightonomics.
It's Freightonomics.
Freightonomics time.
January 29th version. Freightonomics.
We're here.
We're here.
Back
ready. So, welcome to Freightonomics, the weekly podcast where we combine freight and economics.
That's right.
And we try to make it somewhat relatable and interesting for our crew out there. Anybody that's interested, that's worked in the trucking industry, maybe is interested in the trucking industry, freight movements in general, and also wants to know how that relates to the bigger picture of macroeconomics. I'm here with Anthony Smith, as always.
Right. Hello. I am the economist here at FreightWaves.
Yes, you are the lead economist at FreightWaves, and I am Zach Strickland, the director of Freight Market Intelligence.
So and the Sultan.
Yes, but it only makes sense that the director of Freight Market Intelligence and the lead economist would have a show called Freightonomics.
That makes perfect sense.
Correct.
It would be weird if we didn't do that.
It'd be weird if we didn't. So we're going to start something new this week. We're going to, we get so many questions here at FreightWaves about what certain things mean, what they are. I remember when I first entered the space way back when, in 2018. No.
What?
Yeah. Last Wednesday.
Yeah.
When, they threw all this terminology at me and said, you go and just figure it out, and that was like a new language or whatnot.
Did you have a handbook?
I didn't. I didn't have a handbook. I had a bunch of people telling me, this is what this means. This is what, and even then when they told it to me, I was like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you don't know what you don't know.
What's deadhead? That type of stuff. So we're going to start doing some deeper dives on some of these issues.
Yeah. Start real high.
Start high, just so everybody gets that nice backbone of information. We're obviously going to intertwine that into something that is usable.
Yeah.
I think it'll be functional for anybody that operates in the transportation industry, or even shippers out there, anybody that's working in the transportation department,
right?
Something of that nature, and just general. I love random useless facts. So in general,
that's half of economics.
That's most of everything.
Yeah.
It just depends on your perspective.
Yeah, fair enough.
So we're going to fill that up. But this week's topic, Anthony, you want to fill everybody in on what we've got?
Zach, I hear TL and LTL awful lot. What does that mean?
LTL.
What is an LTL?
LTL. It's a liquid transport lime.
So 2018.
It is less than truckload. So I think most people would, they hear about trucking and transportation. They just think of a big 53-foot trailer going back and forth between, a shipper and a destination.
Right.
Some warehouse somewhere and some manufacturer. That's all trucking is. And I'm like, well, that is most of it.
Yeah.
But there are lots of different subsectors of trucking.
Yeah.
And that's an idea for another day.
Yeah.
Breaking down all those subsectors of what it means to be in trucking and transportation. But LTL is trucking's little brother.
Okay.
So what that means, less than truckload, is exactly what it sounds like. It's not a clever acronym for anything that's super complicated. LTL is less than truckload, which means anybody that ships, and it's typically not just like less than a truckload. Like not all truckloads fill up the end of a trailer.
Right.
You typically have these 53-foot trailers, 48-foot containers, et cetera, and everybody just thinks they're full all the time. Well, I think anybody going down the interstate can see these flatbed loads. They're not full.
Yeah.
You can see there's lots of space. Well, a lot of times it doesn't make sense to ship a full truckload because you don't have enough. So it's going to cost you too much. Why would you spend, $2,500 to ship something from Atlanta to Dallas that is only taking up 2 pallet spaces on a truck?
Yeah.
And a pallet space is the LTL. It's the basic unit of shipping in LTL is a pallet, and that's like your standard 40 by 48 by 40, tall width dimmed out pallet. So about, it adds up to around 64 cubic feet of space. You can stack them, you can unstack them, et cetera. Some of them can't be stacked, but LTL carriers are concerned about what that is because truckload, they don't care what's on there.
Just throw it in there.
They just, you know what? You're paying for it all.
Yeah.
You can do what you want with it.
Okay.
It's like renting a space.
Gotcha.
You got all 3,604 cubic feet of that trailer to use however you want, as long as it does not go overweight
Yeah.
or under dim. So there's the other aspect of it. So LTL carriers care about space and they care about weight, but truckload carriers are mainly just concerned about weight.
So Zach, when I'm driving down the road and I see those trailers, it's like those two small trailers, one behind the other. Is that LTL?
So it is traditionally an LTL form of moving. So you're seeing those twin 28s
Yes.
going down the road. And this has been a hotly debated topic in legislation, whether or not there should be twin 33s.
Okay.
But again, the truckload carriers don't really want that because that further, it adds capacity to the market.
Yeah.
It means LTL carriers can carry a little bit more. Now, I would argue that that's not necessarily the case because LTL and truckload are two totally separate things.
Yeah.
Now, back when LTL was, there's always been LTL, but back when it was deregulated and all this kind of stuff, it really became, I guess, somewhat of a competition for truckload. And you might ask yourself, well, how much is LTL in comparison to truckload?
How much is LTL in comparison to truckload?
So in terms of revenue production,
Yeah.
it's about a tenth the size of truckload.
So it's a much smaller.
Much smaller part.
Yeah.
We've got about a 35 to $40 billion segment of the transportation or the trucking industry, whereas for-hire truckload is roughly 350 to 400 billion.
Gotcha.
And then you have a big bunch of private fleet stuff, some parcel mixed in there. Parcel's about 60 billion, I should say.
So parcel, does that not fall under less than truckload?
No, no,
Okay.
parcel is not
Its own
less
thing.
than truckload. So parcel is technically defined as shipments below roughly about 110 pounds
Okay.
and not palletized.
Gotcha.
But that's not like a steadfast rule. It's not like, well, this is an LTL shipment and this is a truckload shipment. No, that's not how it works. It's just what's the most efficient way of transporting this good with cost and timeliness and utilization.
Gotcha.
So you have service, space, capacity, and then, of course, the cost aspect. It's a big deal.
Right.
So you're trying to figure out as a shipper, which one of these modes is the most effective for me to meet those needs? Service, rates, and then, of course, capacity.
Right.
And, a lot of times these shippers, this is why LTL exists, because they can't, they don't want to sit there and wait on, to build a full truckload. If you're a smaller shipper or you have a smaller destination in mind, not necessarily able to handle, 26 pallets, but they can handle 1 or 2 pallets at a time.
Yeah.
But they need to get it there relatively quickly. So they can't sit on these shipments. They don't have space to sit there and store it and wait on a full truckload to take these things to them. So they send it LTL.
Yeah.
Well, the LTL segment is pretty different in the way that it manages its network.
Okay.
Can you imagine why?
Is it because they have less to ship and so they have a higher frequency sometimes?
Well, yes, that's accurate. So the biggest difference here is that LTL, since they do have small shipments, they're not going to go and ship that one pallet across the country on their 28 or 53 foot.
So we're getting into lengths of haul here.
Yeah, they have a much different network.
Okay.
Because they have what they call a hub and spoke type deal or a P&D network around these terminals. Traditional truckload goes from Target DC
Yeah.
to Target DC or Target warehouse to Target DC, unloads the truckload. From there, the Target DC, which is a big distribution center that services all the retail stores, they will then load up another 53-footer sometimes and send it to the retail store if they have enough space. But it'll be a bunch of varied products. They don't have like a truckload of, umbrellas for the summer season.
Yeah.
It'll be some umbrellas, some TVs, it'll be a mixed bag of stuff that they bring from their DC to the store.
Yeah.
Well, the way that it gets to the DC from the shippers is it can be a truckload of TVs and et cetera, and that makes sense. Well, what if they have a commodity that doesn't take up a full truck, but they need it there, say they need some replenishment. The shipper's shipping out a bunch of grills. You go pick them up, take them to your facility, deconsolidate it, and now you're shipping out. They need 2 more pallets of grills go in there instead of a full truckload.
Yeah.
So it's all about the dynamic, the relationship between the shipper and the consignee, how they're trying to manage,
Mm-hmm.
their inventory levels and whatnot. So it's kind of an answer to the just-in-time type deal, even though it's not necessarily just-in-time. It's along those same lines when
Yeah.
they don't have the space or the demand for a full amount of stuff.
Right. And real quick,
Mm-hmm.
for those of you that are watching right now live on LinkedIn or YouTube, we are actually monitoring. I'm monitoring the comments here. So send in those questions, comments, what have you, and we'll get to you. One of the things that you mentioned is commodities. So in my economist mind, I'm thinking metal or things like
Gold,
gold. Yeah.
platinum ore.
Yeah. Those things. But that's not the.
No, so oil is considered a commodity. I mean,
Yeah.
commodities are anything. They're technically any
Anything.
good or
Yeah.
item.
Yeah.
And the way that LTL carriers think about this is, since they are concerned about what's on that truck, because that tells them how much it's going to weigh, how much, type of shipment characteristics, how much it costs if you damage it.
Yeah.
Another big difference between truckload and LTL, they touch the freight a lot more often.
LTL does.
Yes.
Got you.
So LTL traditionally works. You have a P&D network, so pickup and delivery network from a place. So say you wanted to ship something from Calhoun, Georgia, down the road here. They're going to send out a truck, and it's going to pick up a bunch of different stops, maybe multiple stops in Calhoun, Georgia.
Yeah.
They're going to go around to Dahlonega and Etowah and all the little small towns around there, picking up random freight, normally within about a 50 to 100-mile radius of that satellite terminal.
Yeah.
They're going to take up that pallet or two or whatever it is, take it to that terminal. They're going to combine it with other freight and then ship it to potentially another hub terminal.
Okay.
So it might be Atlanta is their hub facility for that area. So they pull it into Atlanta from the Calhoun area, and then they need it to go to San Antonio, Texas. Then
Gotcha.
it will ship across. Now this is where truckload and LTL overlap. They line up going to the line haul is the truckload movement of the freight. So LTL carriers outsource a lot of their line haul to traditional truckload carriers, as well as use their own trucks.
What is line haul?
So line haul is the truckload movement
Okay.
between two terminals.
Gotcha.
So it will be a full truck going from Atlanta to Dallas or San Antonio, wherever I said it was going.
Yeah.
And then they'll deconsolidate it. They won't deliver everything on that truck
Okay.
from their specific, right away. It's going to, that line haul is a truckload movement. Truckload carriers out there will know this. You don't want to have more than a couple of stops
Okay.
because it's inefficient. And then your costs that's another conversation altogether, but your costs are actually, you're paying a lot more for freight if you're paying for the entire movement on a truckload. So if you're going to stop in Dallas and stop in New Mexico,
Yeah.
you're paying for the entire length,
Okay.
even though you're not using the full truck.
Gotcha.
So that's another topic altogether. But they stop in Dallas, they take off all that freight, and then they put it on their dock, a cross dock, if you will.
Cross dock.
Yeah, they'll cross dock it, which is the movement of the pallet across the dock. And then it will go into a delivery trailer.
Okay.
And that delivery trailer could be a box truck,
Okay.
which is your straight truck. You see that, the furniture movers and stuff
So
like that.
that's starting to get into like a whole nother mode, right? Or
It could.
is final mile a mode?
No, it is not. And if you read any of our stuff, and final mile does get confused with being some sort of subsegment of LTL.
Yeah.
It's not remotely the same thing.
Yeah.
The operation itself is far disparate. Final mile doesn't have your traditional hub and spoke movement.
Okay.
They have. Normally, the final mile sector is like, you bring it to my facility, I'll have somebody go out there, and then they have this inside delivery aspect of it, this setup segment. It's
Yeah.
basically like having a larger commodity,
Hey.
which can be like furniture, appliances,
Yeah.
clothing, name something that you get, pictures, podcast booths.
Yeah. I order those all the time.
Yeah. And they'll take those and they'll set them up in the facility or house or whatever it is. A lot of this is, one of the things that has been growing a lot more in recent years has been the grocery sector in
Yeah.
final mile. Well, if it's not on a pallet, it's not traditional LTL. So
Gotcha.
LTL wants to bump docks. They want to bump facilities because there's not, they're trying to deliver pallets of freight. The final mile sector is kind of like what LTL is to truckload. So final
Okay.
mile is to LTL. It's a little bit more specialized, smaller shipments, not necessarily in size because you do have some of your larger items, but it's in between that parcel and LTL sector.
Okay.
And they specialize in delivering those goods.
Right.
And it's very complicated because those commodities tend to be very irregularly shaped. They're not on pallets.
Yeah.
That's why LTL likes pallets so much.
Yeah.
They can
Easy.
control it. You can stack squares and rectangles on top of each other.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've tried to put a jigsaw puzzle together lately,
It's been a couple of weeks.
but yeah. But think about it in terms of, space.
Yeah.
I'm trying to stack up, you're filling the trunk
Mm-hmm.
for a long haul.
Mm-hmm.
So all those items that are going on final mile, they don't have to be on pallets. Like most
Yeah.
LTL carriers are saying, I need this to be on a pallet for me to handle it. It's going to make sure that we don't damage it.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to stack with other stuff better. I mean, my old company was a carpet hauler.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we didn't want to mix it with other things that weren't carpet because it was very, there was, it just wasn't as efficient.
Yeah.
In terms of moving it, you had different, you just want the same shape with the same shape
Yeah.
in general.
Yeah.
Final mile carriers deal with this all the time, and the way that their stuff is shaped irregularly, so fitting it all on one truck is very inefficient. Also, you have to think about when you're delivering something, you want the heavier item up front, behind you, on the delivery route.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of stuff that goes into that, LTL, traditional LTL, palletized freight, they just stack it up in terms of, what the stops are.
Yeah.
And then they'll deliver it on their route. So the deconsolidation happens in Dallas. They put it on a delivery truck with other freight going to a similar area or a similar route, go around, make their stops a pallet or two at a time.
Okay.
And, one of the common questions is, what's too big for an LTL shipment?
Zach, what's too big for an LTL shipment?
Yeah. So LTL shipments are traditionally less than 10,000 pounds.
Okay.
Or about 5 to 6 pallets. Anything over that is considered a volume shipment.
Okay.
And then, it's not that the LTL carriers won't haul these things. Have you heard the term volume shipment since you've been here?
Not that often.
Yeah.
Not that often.
Yeah. Well, it happens on occasion. And I know that I've talked to numerous people that are concerned about their volume shipments because it is common practice for some shippers to have 15,000 pound shipments on the regular.
Yeah.
So they are still, by scale, more expensive than truckload because it's still a consolidation effort. You still hit docks, and they actually can disrupt your network,
Okay.
especially LTL networks, pretty significantly. But they, you can call in, get a quote, but it will be pretty expensive. So if they could wait, but most of the time they can't. They've already figured that out.
Yeah.
They can't wait.
Yeah. And so, with the differences between truckload and less than truckload, as you mentioned, there are different networks, right? Are there certain companies that do both LTL and truckload?
Yeah, there's lots. Well, I can't say lots. So the top 25 LTL companies basically are, I forget the stat off the top of my head, but it's roughly 31 billion of the $40 billion.
Gotcha.
So it's far less fragmented, but you do have some companies that do both. I mean, all LTL companies haul truckload
Yeah.
because of their line haul networks. That's so in that sense, when I was talking about truckload competing with LTL, it's still a competition in that way. But those truckload carriers won't have access to that freight in general.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Because and in a lot of cases they're handing them off. UPS, for instance, 2018. I don't know if you heard about this year, but
2018.
2018,
It was a very busy year.
it was a busy year.
It was a very busy year.
Yeah, everybody basically got, they felt it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they, had this, significant increase in activity. All these LTL carriers got increased volumes, truckload carriers got increased volumes, et cetera. So 2018, and I forgot where I was going with that. I just forgot. I just totally lost my train of thought out of nowhere.
Were you making a connection on LTL and truckload kind of coming together, I guess.
Yeah. Oh,
with
yeah,
different-
yeah. So they don't necessarily compete. 2018. So the LTL shippers will ship LTL independently of their truckload shipments,
Okay.
and their truckload shipments will, they haul them in a different. They almost put them on a separate dock. The LTL stuff has to be separated out a little bit more. So the truckload carriers aren't going to have access to that freight anyway.
Okay.
Because there's a reason. Like, unless you're going to pay, like I said, $2,500 to ship 2 pallets from Atlanta to Dallas, like that's not cost effective. You're probably going to figure out a way around that regardless.
Yeah.
For whatever you've got to do. But so they're not technically in competition.
Gotcha.
In that regard. And some of those, a lot of these carriers will have an LTL subsector. My company, for instance, back in the day was a subset of US Express, but we really didn't have a lot to do with each other.
Gotcha.
We actually got away from using their equipment over time. Of course, we'd try to help them with certain accounts every now and again, but really, we were two separate companies.
Yeah.
We didn't really, there wasn't necessarily a lot of synergy there in terms of, and there can be. I mean, UPS, FedEx,
Yeah.
the two largest for-hire carriers in the United States by revenue, have LTL divisions.
Okay.
FedEx Freight,
Yeah.
and UPS obviously has their division, and they will use UPS trucks to haul it. They have truckloads, but they also outsource to other carriers for some of that, because you only want to have enough to handle like a certain mid-range of your high and low.
Yeah.
There in the middle.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, that's. I mean, LTL and truckload, they act like they're competition, but they're really not.
Yeah.
I mean, US Express and my division weren't really. We didn't compete with each other by any means. We actually helped each other out more often than not, one way or the other, because our segments just were so different.
Gotcha.
The pricing, for instance, for truckload.
And so one of the things, so this might be a whole nother thing down the line. You mentioned you're not going to ship something truckload when it's just 2 pallets. Typically, you'll find a way around it.
Right.
Expedited shipping, where does that fall?
So so now you're talking about just expedited LTL or expedited truckload.
Okay.
So expedited is really just a way of saying I want something above the normal standard of service, or potentially guaranteed delivery.
Okay.
So it could be within the normal standard of, say this, the Atlanta to Dallas lane that I'm picking on, that's a 2-day run. Normally we'll guarantee that it's there in 3. Well, I want to make sure that it's there tomorrow. That would be an example of an expedited shipment. Or I want to make sure it's there in at minimum 2 days.
Yeah.
Again, just guaranteeing that service. Even though there's a good chance that freight's going to get there in 2 days, you just want to make sure that it's there. So it doesn't really matter if it's truckload or LTL. Expedited is what it is.
Gotcha.
On its own.
Gotcha.
It's just an extended service of both.
Gotcha. And so LTL.
Less than truckload.
I hear this thing of the gold standard of less than truckload.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
Who is the gold standard of LTL?
Well, that would be a little group called Old Dominion.
Okay.
And Old Dominion is, one of the bigger companies in terms of transportation. I believe they're in the top 9 overall, top 9 or 10 of overall freight or trucking companies in America. And, I have some notes here. They're roughly worth about $4 billion in revenue. I think 2019 number is $4 billion. The number 3 largest LTL provider in the country. But in terms of service expectations, they're widely considered as the best. Their operating ratios are down in the 80s.
Yeah, which
consistently.
is not common.
Even in 2016.
Yeah,
I think they were in the mid 80s in that range.
And 2016 being a very rough year.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. 2016, not a great year for freight, and they still operated their socks off.
Yeah.
Back in the day, now we just had breaking news this month.
Okay.
Over a little company called XPO. You heard about XPO?
Is that Bradley Jacobs over there?
Yeah. That's good old Bradley Jacobs.
I think I've heard of them once or twice.
Yeah. So if you've been to any of our events,
Yeah.
I believe it was last fall that Bradley Jacobs was there. And he, effectively XPO bought this company called Conway.
Mm-hmm.
And Conway back in the day was actually the gold standard for LTL.
Okay.
And that recently, that changed. Not that they really degraded that much or anything like that. It's just Old Dominion basically got on top of it and really started growing, getting a little bit more. They gained some market share.
Yeah.
XPO, again, Bradley's, they're deconsolidating their holdings, and they're
Yeah.
holding on to Conway
Yeah.
for a reason.
Yeah.
So everything that they absorbed is now part of, this. It's just basically the Conway platform that they're holding on to, and they're going to, try to sell off a bunch of their managed transportation, what they call their North American Transportation Division.
Okay.
Which is like brokerage, managed transportation, et cetera. And it's as a unit, they're trying to sell that off. But they're going to hold on to the LTL sector.
Gotcha.
And, there's a lot of people that, they're wondering like why this is happening, et cetera. Like, I think I understand why.
Mm-hmm.
It's because that division runs really well, runs really smoothly, but also XPO is it didn't horizontally integrate
Gotcha.
Conway with these other divisions. Because everybody goes back to this truckload versus LTL thing. How connected are they? They're really not. They're really, they compete in the way that they do have some sort of capacity that they do add to the market. But this is a totally different sector of business. They're not remotely the same thing in terms of how shippers use it and how carriers manage it. Like I said, truckload, A to B, LTL, A subset A to A to B, then maybe takes a journey to C, then C subset C, and then delivery finally. It's a multi-step journey. So there's a lot more costs involved in that.
Yeah.
Can you guess what this does to the operation compared to the truckload?
That's going to increase operating costs. Operation costs.
Yeah, significantly.
Yeah.
And a lot more moving parts.
And so with those, a lot more moving parts, a lot more hands touching the commodities.
There you go.
What does this do does this have any effect on insurance cost?
Yes. So traditionally, LTL carriers will touch the freight more than the truckload. Truckload carriers don't even need to see or touch the freight.
Yeah,
They close it up, put a seal on it,
haul it. Yeah.
haul it. They check that it's there, and then when they break the seal on it, the destination checks off that it's there, and so the truckload carriers don't have to have cross docks or facilities like that.
Yeah.
LTL companies touch the freight.
Got you.
Every single time they're touching the freight because that pickup is going to go to a cross dock facility or some form of docking area where it'll get staged, and that means just put on a dock for loading, and then so that means that every time that you move that piece of freight, there's a chance that you're going to damage it. You have forklifts on all these docks, and they go right underneath that pallet. Well, a lot of times those forks, when they're flying around real fast, and you get a lot of dock workers out there just basically like, well, I'm doing this all day long.
Yeah.
Lose a little concentration. Goes right in the side of the pallet, damages the freight or whatnot. Again, movement. There's increasing chances. So you have cargo liability issues on LTL that you don't really have on truckload, even though there's still cargo liability on truckload. But the odds of damage are higher on the LTL side.
Gotcha.
Even though Old Dominion does claim a 99.9% claims ratio. So when you hear these LTL carriers talk about, service and revenue and stuff like that, those kind of achievements, they'll always mention their claims.
Yeah.
If it's something worth talking about. Because that is a bigger deal
Gotcha.
for the LTL side. And it does create costs, and most shippers will ask LTL carriers about their claims ratios.
Yeah.
Whereas on truckload, they're just asking about your service and your price.
Gotcha.
And so to that aspect, yes, insurance does play a little bit higher factor. But other than that, you're talking about, a lot. Everything else is the same.
Okay.
All the auto liability insurance, the stuff like that, that's all the same. They're still covering the same miles, if not more mileage, because you're gonna have increased miles per shipment.
Gotcha.
Because you're taking a more circuitous route, because you're having to consolidate and
Yeah.
hit other docks, whereas the truckload, it's a lot less mileage going in between it.
And if you're a driver, right, you're hauling these goods, can you just switch back and forth from truckload to less than truckload depending on what your, I guess, lifestyle that you're wanting, like being able to just go regionally, A, subset A, B.
I mean, so LTL P&D drivers
Mhm.
are their attrition rates, or the rates at which they leave the company, are a lot lower
Yeah.
because it's essentially like a dedicated run, and therefore but at the same time, since it is kind of a dedicated run and it's more desirable, easier to fill those spots, they don't get paid as much.
Gotcha.
They were more paid on an hourly scale versus a per mile scale. Or they can even be paid per stop or per route.
Gotcha.
There's other variations of it. They're not just traditional mileage pay, which dominates the truckload sector. So they're going to be home every night, more than likely. There's a few out there that'll run those long pedal runs in Texas and North Dakota and upstate Michigan and stuff like that. But more often than not, they're going to be home every night, running multiple stops, though. That's
Gotcha.
a big difference, is these truckload over-the-road guys, a lot of them like to be on the road driving.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a P&D driver for LTL, you're not driving as much. You're making a lot more. You're making around 9 to 12 stops a day,
Mm-hmm.
dropping off a pallet every now and again. And that's another difference between truckload and LTL.
Yeah.
Because it's less freight, you don't get as much time at each stop either. So
Gotcha.
to truckload, they're going to sit there for a couple hours, getting unloaded or loaded or whatever it is. And then
Detention.
Yes, detention.
Which we'll get into probably later on.
Yes.
Different episode.
Yes. So detention for an LTL carrier traditionally starts a lot sooner
Okay.
because that is a huge disruption. You typically get about 30 minutes to an hour for free at an LTL stop, but it's not great if you're spending an hour at an LTL stop.
Yeah.
Because think about the day. If you're making 10 to 12 stops a day, that's a lot of hours.
and they're limited the same amount of hours of service, right?
Exactly. Yeah. They're still Class 8 drivers.
Yeah.
They're 11 hours, on the clock, 14 on duty.
Right.
Again, those stops can count for just on duty time, but still, there's only so much time in the day.
Right. Right.
So if they get stuck, think about it. If a truckload is doing about 2 hours a day, to stop, maybe 3 to 4 if you've been really efficient and picked up one load and driven, your 450 miles and then finished off, depending on where you are. But an LTL truck, just doesn't have a lot of those are dropping hooks, which are where they pick up the truckload of freight for the pickup side. So it's not as much of an issue on the detention thing because they're just picking up a full loaded trailer already. They bring it back to their cross-dock facility, and then they deconsolidate that. But on the delivery end, most of it's not a truckload that they're delivering. It's all multiple stops.
Gotcha.
So now they have, on the delivery end, they need to make, 4 or 5 hours worth of deliveries with 6 hours to drive.
Yeah.
So if they get hung up in any one of those, especially if it takes them a longer time to get to a point or not, depending on their route, that's why they like these 50-mile radiuses.
Yeah.
If you look at an LTL network, you're going to see these little speckles all over the place. Like they're covering up their region. Averett, Southeastern all has clusters of terminals around big metro areas.
Yeah.
And that's because they want to keep that pickup and delivery range real tight.
Gotcha.
To make those stops, the time between stops smaller.
Gotcha.
Because delivering that freight, that's why the drivers too are paid by hour and stop, because that's kind of their motivating factor. Like, I've got to be working. I need to work. I've got to make stops to get my money, et cetera. So that's again, just like the per mile rate motivates them to drive miles on the over the road sector.
Yeah.
The per stop thing motivates them to make their stops.
Gotcha.
Keeps the truck moving.
Gotcha. And you mentioned, spoke about some of the LTL folks, Old Dominion being one. What about truckload? It was one of the biggest ones.
So Knight Swift is the largest.
That was a merger, right?
Yes. Knight Swift merger back in 2016.
Yeah.
Ish. Yeah. The time it goes.
4 years later.
Yeah. Yeah, and they are $3.5 billion.
Wow.
So the largest LTL, FedEx, $7.5 billion.
Bigger than the largest truckload.
And again, you have to keep in mind that LTL shipments are more expensive
Yeah.
by about 4 to 5 times than a truckload. Like if you were to scale out if you had 26 pallets on a truck,
Yeah.
which is traditionally what fills up a truckload, if you just single stack it,
Yeah.
that means they're all on the floor, like one pallet next to each other,
Mm-hmm.
2 wide, 13 deep.
Yeah.
If you were to price out every piece of freight on there on an LTL pricing scheme, it would come out about 4 to 5 times higher
Got you.
than the consolidated version of all 26 of them together.
Got you.
That's what that means. It's not that it's going to cost you more to ship one pallet
Yeah.
by 4 to 5 times. It means that if you were to price every one of those by LTL standards versus the truckload standard, it's going to be significantly more expensive.
Got you.
So that 7.5 billion is a little bit, misleading because it's not 1-to-1 in terms of cost and weight or size or whatever it is or shipment. So Knight Swift, FedEx is huge, obviously, but the second biggest is Yellow Roadway at 5 billion. They're the traditional LTL carrier.
Gotcha.
Yellow Roadway used to be somewhat of a gold standard back in the 90s.
Okay.
Super efficient operation. They were Roadway back then. Yellow bought them way back when. They are a union carrier.
Okay.
So unions have had lots of influence in the trucking industry.
Gotcha.
Did you watch The Irishman?
I looked at it on Netflix and I saw that was like 3+ hours.
Yeah.
And I decided against it.
Yeah. It's a lot of time. It's a commitment.
Yeah.
I personally wasn't huge on it, and I love that. And again, my expectations probably had a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Thinking about
the cast.
thinking about Goodfellas and Taxi Driver and all the stuff Scorsese's done, like Departed and all this. Like I'm amped for this thing.
Yeah.
And I was just like, eh. But a lot of that activity was, revolved around Jimmy Hoffa and the Teamsters, and a lot of the, the traditional truckload carriers back in the day, back before deregulation, were union. And some of these LTL carriers are lumped into that, like or is it New Penn? I think New Penn is a union LTL carrier. Not 100% sure, but the union tends to add a layer of bureaucracy to the operation of an LTL network. A Yellow Roadway has that, so it costs more by nature. Anytime you add a layer of management, it makes it less efficient, and then you're running, super tight schedules. LTL does not have, their ORs are comparable. You don't make higher OR in LTL versus truckload, for instance, in general. So it's not necessarily like a more profitable division. Yeah. It's just higher barrier to entry.
Gotcha.
It's hard to shoot up at an LTL network out of nowhere, whereas you can go buy a truck, start hauling tomorrow.
Yeah.
LTL, like I said, hub and spoke. You're wanting to get from, you've got to pick up in a radius.
Yeah.
Then you truckload it to an area because there's not enough freight to do it by itself.
Yeah.
Then spit it out into another area. So to do that, you need to have a lot of customers.
Yeah.
Or a lot of shipments. And I believe that's where the term freight moves freight really starts.
Gotcha.
Because they don't want to cut that truck from Atlanta to Dallas until it's as full as it can possibly be.
Right.
It could be 40,000 pounds full, or, cubic feet wise, it's filling up the trailer.
Yeah.
They want the most efficient version of all of that, which is around 16 pounds per cubic foot. That gives you, I believe, that weights out the truck and also cubes out the truck.
Gotcha.
At the same time. So you're constantly looking for that average overall, because you can have a bunch of pillows and mattresses and stuff sitting on there, which they don't really like to have, but it does fit well if you have like a bunch of rocks or stone or sand, all these commodities.
Yeah.
So that's why LTL is such a commodity game, because you're constantly trying to figure out what the optimal mix on that trailer is, because what drives the rate in LTL is weight and distance. So
not volume.
Yeah, no, not well. In terms of density, it's a factor, but you're looking for things that weigh a lot.
Yeah, not a bunch of pillows.
No, well, and they get around that by classifying them.
Okay.
So because they're not going to sit there and charge you. It's not like truckload where everything looks the same.
Yeah.
Dallas to Los Angeles is priced the same as Dallas to Atlanta.
Yeah.
No, the pillows are a class 150 item,
Yeah.
and sand is a class 50 item.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can feel the difference there,
Yeah.
the higher the class, typically the lighter, the fluffier it is. The lower the class, the heavier, the denser it is.
Yeah.
And it's not like one's worse than the other. It just means that, one is going to be higher cost per pound
Mm-hmm.
versus the other.
Got you.
Does that make sense?
Got you.
I mean, if you think about it, so that's why you want things to weigh. Like that's what's going to drive, because you can have 1 pound of pillows,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to cost. It should technically cost more by about. It should be about 100% more.
Okay.
So double the cost
Yeah.
of the pound of sand.
Got you.
That makes sense.
Different classification.
They kind of move in that kind of scale because every single class. So there's 17, 18 classes,
Okay.
and they go from 50 to 500.
Okay.
And it starts at 50, then it goes 55, then 60, 65, 70. Then you start going to 7.5,
Okay.
77.5, 85, etc. You can all look this up.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into all the classifications, but this is what makes LTL far more complicated
Mm-hmm.
because you're not just thinking about, well, I'm sending 3 trucks to Dallas today.
Yeah.
It means I need to get 3 trucks moving tomorrow,
Got you.
go in another place. It's not that simple.
Hmm.
LTL has to think about that in terms of their network. If they're using their own equipment, that's why
Yeah.
they use a lot of outsource
Yeah.
because they don't want to add that layer of complexity that's already super complicated
Right.
on trying to figure out how do I get all my trucks out of Dallas.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, we'll just send it one way because they're naturally imbalanced.
Got you.
Yeah.
Got you. All right. Well, just a quick reminder to you all, we are live on LinkedIn right now and YouTube. So get those comments in. We did have Robert Cowton saying, yes, owner operators can run truckload both long and short haul. This same driver can switch to do some LTL between full truckloads.
Yeah, no, and I've heard of a lot of owner operators having a lot of success with this model.
Yeah.
If you do it right, if you can manage the LTL side of it as being an owner op, which is very hard to do,
Yeah.
you can really make some good money.
Yeah.
The upside of hauling LTL as a single operator is tremendous.
Got you.
But you got to be on point.
Got you.
Because think about all the different layers of complexity that I just went through.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not just getting from A to B. It's A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Yeah.
Then going to D, J, K, L, M, O. Whatever that region is. So
Yeah.
it's you can cross regions, stay inside the region, et cetera. There's regional LTL, just like there's regional. And it actually makes more sense to be regional LTL
Mm-hmm.
versus nationwide LTL, which is what, all the bigger ones are nationwide, obviously. And I should mention that XPO Conway is the 4th largest LTL
Gotcha.
company in the United States in terms of revenue in that sector.
And
Good
so
deal.
one of the things that you mentioned are those commodities that go into it. And that can really drive the freight economy, right? Is those goods that get hauled in the freight. So what we mentioned earlier, 2016 not being a stellar year for the freight industry, 2018 being a pretty tremendous year for the freight industry. And looking at what was going on at that time. So in 2016, we had a freight recession, and we also had an industrial recession. So we had a lack of commodities, if you will, to haul on the manufacturing side. 2018, we had really a nice ramp up in manufacturing, and we also had some pretty good activity on the consumer side as well. So that's really where some of the economics, the economics and Freightonomics.
The economics.
And so real quick, just jumping into some of the commodity driven markets that we have going on here.
Yeah. Let's do it. You had some pretty decent releases come out last week.
A lot of them were right up my alley with housing.
Yes.
A lot of housing releases.
Housing's really been your big star.
It's been my star.
Yeah.
It's been my star.
That and the consumer.
You
guys are feeling
consumer
each other.
confidence.
You guys are feeling each other.
Did you know where I was going with this? Well, with housing start. We'll start off strong. Home Purchase Sentiment Index, the HPSI from Fannie Mae, is still relatively high.
Sentiment.
Yeah, that sentiment, that feeling, they're feeling good. They're feeling good. And so that's really going to drive a lot of housing activity. One of the areas that we really saw that was doing well came from the existing home sales. And so existing home sales finished the year off strong with a 3.6% gain in December.
That's year over year.
That's year
right?
over year.
Yep.
I'm sorry, that's from month to
Oh,
month.
month to month. Okay.
So
Sorry.
3.6% gain from November,
Okay.
10.8% rise year over year. So
Wow.
December from
Wow.
yeah. So it's a pretty substantial rise. But there of course are some hardships that are going on within the housing market on both existing and new home sales. We'll get into new home sales here soon. But when we're looking at existing home sales, it's not going to have the same. So when we look at housing starts, we're thinking of like, okay, that's a house that's being built. There is the building materials being hauled, being flatbed.
A lot of flatbed.
Yeah.
A lot of flatbed activity.
And so the thing I like to connect with existing home sales is like, okay, we're not moving building materials per se, but we are moving goods that go into those homes
Like
because
couches,
appliances,
Yeah.
things that we just covered that go on LTL and truckload
and they, and the LTL sector does haul a lot of appliances.
yeah.
That's a pretty big sector for them, as well as some of that furniture. Now, you don't get as much furniture.
Okay.
Furniture goes largely truckload because it's super bulky.
I can imagine being able to palletize
You just can't
appliances.
palletize. Yes, you can palletize, washers,
washing machines.
dryers.
Yeah.
And they're pretty standard. They're still kind of a hassle to deal with.
Yeah.
They're considered not necessarily the ideal commodity for LTL.
Right.
But it is a pretty big sector for them. Samsung and LG and all that kind of stuff. Going to these Home Depots and, formerly the Sears, RIP. But again, it's one of the commodities we're tracking on our maritime side.
Mhm.
And you can't necessarily see this yet, but we're working on breaking this out, is what kind of commodities are coming across the ocean.
Got you.
And we saw a lot of furniture
Okay.
come in over the last several months.
Yeah.
So, when you're talking about these existing home sales,
hmm
that's the thing to think about. If you're out there and you're thinking about, well, how does this relate to freight?
Yeah.
Existing home sales mean finishings,
Yeah.
furniture, appliances, things of that nature. When those are doing well,
Yeah.
that's what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have another hot take.
Okay.
I've never actually gone on paper with this, but because it's such a tight housing market right now, that's also with the inventories on existing homes, that's really making it more of a seller's market right now if you have a home.
Right.
And so with that, I think there's less of an onus for the owners to fix up their houses or make any kind of improvements or remodeling jobs in order to really ramp up activity that would traditionally feed into some of the flatbed or building materials being moved. And so I think that's delaying the process a little bit more for some of those home improvement projects. So maybe the buyer is like, you know what, that's fine. These are just, it's character. I can work on this project later on down the line. And I think that might be delaying some of the remodeling aspect as well. So that's a bit of a hot take. Maybe down the line, we'll see that. But yeah, it was a good month for existing home sales. Median home price for homes in December for existing homes was $274,500. And so that the median home price, it rose 7.4% on a year-over-year basis. And this is the 94th consecutive month of year-over-year rise for existing home sales prices. And so
it's inflating.
It's going up. Yeah. And I think because such a tight labor market, but such a tight inventory for homes is really jacking up those prices. That's especially for existing homes.
Do you think that's going to continue?
Homes. I think it's going to continue, and I think.
I mean, at that kind of rate, that seems like a pretty. 7.4%. When you think about inflation,
yeah, that's
significant.
Yeah, that's significant.
That feels bubble worthy.
And so that's the thing. I think because demand is so high right now, and inventory is so limited, I think that's really going to help prop up prices through 2020. And I think so. Say, worst case scenario, say there was a recession. I don't think that the housing market would be as deeply impacted as it was in the past. Just because I think as prices come down, more and more buyers would try to enter the game
Okay.
And so I think
That makes sense.
yeah, so we'll see what happens on that front. But
Well, we already had our housing recession.
we did.
We learned our lesson, hopefully, right?
No, we didn't.
Okay.
We have short memories as a species, but when we're looking at across the country, there's going to be different characteristics. So the Midwest, going to have the lowest prices typically for existing homes. The median price there was right around $208,000 per home. South usually is going to make up a much larger portion of the homes. That's going to be just when you look on a map. It covers usually a more larger area, but it's going to be over 50% or around 50% when we're looking at housing starts per se.
Oh, because they got room. They got room to
They
build.
got room.
I mean, the Midwest, you go to Chicago. There's not a lot of space.
There's
to
not a
plop
lot of
down a house.
space. Northeast, especially, a lot of mature market.
Right.
Going to be some expensive homes there.
Right.
As long as some of the parts of the West Coast, you can thank California for that.
Yeah.
But there are different characteristics, like California. Characteristic there is regulations, but it's all different. It's all going to vary on region to region. Another good area for homes, we had new home sales.
Oh, okay.
And so new home sales, it dropped 0.4% in December, month to month. But
Oh, month to month. That's normal, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Because, Zach, it was still 23% up year over year.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So I'm going to go through some of these numbers, and you tell me when it starts sounding a little bit strange here.
Okay.
So we had the Northeast down 11% month to month, down 11% year over year. Okay.
All right.
Midwest up 10% and up 33% year over year. Oh, wow. That's
That's a big number.
a big number.
Why is the Midwest up so much? I
And
thought
that's-
that was kind of a mature.
It's a mature.
I guess they got a
area.
lot of room though.
There's not a ton of people moving there, but I think that's becoming more of a thing for millennials now. I think they're gonna start
Okay.
moving there.
And
But
there's a lot of opportunity around that area.
Mhm.
Minneapolis, Chicago, Indianapolis still has. There's still a lot of room for development.
it'd
in
be
the
real nice
outskirts.
if you can get like a job in Silicon Valley. Get that money.
Yeah.
Work remote.
Yeah, right.
Go to Kansas. I mean, I commend you. But
I couldn't do that.
the South up 15% month over month, down 1% year over year.
Okay.
Now here is where it gets staggering. West up 31% new home sales month over month, and up 99.2% year over year.
What?
Yeah. So
Wait. You're gonna have to back the truck up.
yeah, oh, I see what you're doing. So I think when we're looking at December, some of the stuff that was going on in the West Coast, I think we had quite a bit of wildfire damage going on in the latter half of 2018. So the comps get a little bit iffy there.
Right. Okay.
So weaker comps, but still, I think overall we're heading in the right direction for year-over-year growth when we're looking at that. A lot of catalysts. So, of course, low mortgage rates.
This goes back to the whole natural disaster stimulating the economy type deal. It's unfortunate that it happens this way, but
Right.
it does. I mean, any kind of infrastructure damaging event,
Yeah.
wildfires out in
Yeah.
California. I mean that's going to have. I mean, it does have a positive impact in
Yeah.
the longer run to the
Yeah.
economy.
It does. So yeah, I mean, we're looking at low mortgage rates, low jobless claims, high confidence as always.
So you're telling me that the economy's doing okay?
the consumer side is doing really well.
Oh.
The consumer side, we're still kind of, meandering along on the manufacturing front. One of the things I don't know if you remember, a couple of weeks ago, when we really saw things heating up in the Middle East.
Mhm.
We were talking about non-defense capital goods and all that
Right.
stuff. Maybe defense capital spending would go up, and it did.
Okay.
But I think a lot of it was due in part to a bill that was passed by Congress to allow more military spending. And so that really helped kind of spur some of that. So, and
That government money.
government money. And so,
Yeah.
and so growth in December for new orders, for defense new orders, it surged 168%.
My God.
And so that's compared to last month.
Mhm.
And so again, defense spending and aircraft spending is usually volatile. For comparison, I think so aircraft new orders down 74.7%. Now, of course,
Oh,
at
that's
Boeing.
737 Max.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a mixed bag. Business activity is still up year over year as measured by non-defense capital goods new orders. So there's that little gleam, even though
Yeah.
it was down month to month, it's still up year over year.
I mean, so as, in terms of the freight market, how it's working, we're not seeing any real sign of any expansion on the demand side. So I mean, whatever's happening right now,
Yeah,
it's not showing up with any. I mean, I think actually what you're saying is it's actually is showing up the way that it's supposed to.
yeah.
We're in this very flat year over year,
Hmm.
not necessarily on the housing side. So the flatbedders out there should be seeing some pickup year
Yeah,
over year.
yeah. If supply can keep up with that demand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, they can't really do much in the winter. So
Hmm.
you're really not going to, I guess you're really not going to see that much in terms of starting new housing right now, but maybe there'll be some pent up demand here in the spring and summer when things
Definitely.
warm up, which is where we're kind of expecting things to pick up a little bit more
In the second half of the year.
in the second half of
Yeah.
the year. Now,
Especially for manufacturing.
it can't get a lot worse, right?
Oh, you can.
Okay,
Oh.
well, that's depressing. But a lot of our stuff now isn't as dependent on producing the stuff in house
Mhm.
in the country as much anymore. Anyway, you're getting more goods coming in from overseas, et cetera, as the manufacturing is kind of diminished
Yeah.
anyway. So there's a natural kind of decline in that sector. Oil obviously has a big deal to do with that.
Yeah.
If you listen to John Kingston, our resident oil,
The legendary John
Yeah.
Kingston.
we've been waiting on the IMO thing for a while, and
Yeah.
it just isn't materializing. People have excess supply, so eventually they're going to do something about that. The price of oil will probably go back up, which may stimulate some things in the
Yeah.
long run. But again, a lot of people, I know I was talking to him the other day when he was in town. Everybody still thinks that it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Just not right now.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard to say, hard to tell, because things are kind of behaving differently. We had Kyle on last week talking
Yeah.
about it, and he was like, "Well, it's kind of what the market does.
Yeah.
If you think something's going to happen for long enough,
Mhm.
it does the opposite because everybody's already ready for it."
Yeah.
So again, there's speculation involved there, which isn't the actual tangible thing. There's
Mhm.
speculation that's still driving a lot of that. So
Right.
that doesn't necessarily mean that we're not in store for something.
Yeah.
Speculation and things actually happening are two totally different things, as we
Definitely.
all know. But yeah, our volumes are still flat.
Mhm.
We've increased a little bit in volume week over week because we had Martin Luther King last week.
Mhm.
That does have about a 1 to 2% impact on overall freight demand.
Yeah.
So we did go a little bit up.
Yeah.
I wasn't even thinking about that last week. I was like, oh yeah, that should go up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's still, overall trend line is still down slightly. We're at a 9,600 something on the OTVI.
Okay. So under the
We're
10,000.
4% underneath, where we would typically see your March
Mhm.
volume be. But February, again, not a robust month.
Right.
Not expecting a lot there. Tender rejection rates. So overall capacity, it's in a free fall again.
Mm.
This is actually a little unexpected. The fact that it's falling rapidly now.
Really?
We were over 7.5% last week.
For total outbound tender rejections.
Yes.
Yeah.
For total tender rejection rates. And now we have fallen under, well into the sixes. We're probably going to break through that 6 barrier real soon.
Okay.
Which last year at this time we were roughly 7%,
Mhm.
a little over 7%. In a flat market, didn't really see the capacity
Yeah.
loosen real quickly until about April, May.
Got you.
So we're not seeing any of those supply side contractions yet. We weren't expecting to see them in January, not with any significance, at least to show up in the market.
Mhm.
They're happening. They're just not happening to where you can see it yet.
Got you.
The AB5 thing didn't materialize. But a lot of people had already prepped for it. So you're not seeing a lot of capacity come offline in California.
Yeah.
And then IMO not happening right now.
Yeah.
But insurance sure is going up.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So eventually these things will add up. And we said this is going to be a slow process.
Mhm.
They don't just knee jerk like they do. Like it takes a cataclysmic event to see this knee jerk reaction.
Yeah.
And we're probably, again, it's got to be a hurricane, and it's probably not something we really want to see
Right.
that'll do this.
Right.
It's something that will just, it's going to be a slow crawl throughout the year. Well, Anthony, do you have anything for us to argue over that we don't agree on? You've really upset America.
Yeah, with the whole bacon being overrated,
Bacon
cheese
and
is
cheese.
overrated.
I mean, you've gotten a lot of
Chicago style pizza, deep dish
Yeah.
pizza. I'm not even gonna say it's overrated. It's just not good.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be considered pizza.
yeah.
I think you've stopped the whole food argument because
Yeah,
I was gonna
no,
go
we're-
on curly fries next.
We're done. We're
'Cause
done with food.
Traditional fries are better than curly fries every single day of the week.
I'm not going to let you do that to me.
Okay.
Every week. I'm not going to let you do that to.
Because I was gonna bring up ice cream. I was gonna bring
No,
up a lot.
no,
Okay.
no.
Okay. So off of
You
food.
obviously don't like food. This is not
Take it or leave it. You know.
exactly.
Take it or leave it.
This is what I'm talking about.
Fasting's good for you.
Oh my
Fast
God.
every once in a while.
You don't
know?
eat for days. It's like, do without it.
What was it? The Lion King.
Lion King.
I don't know if that's really a debatable one, but I really feel like Scar got a bad rap, and he's more so the good guy than.
So Scar was a jerk.
He wasn't that big of a jerk. He was
was a
put in a
jerk.
bad position.
Why was he in a bad position? He was jealous of his brother, who was bigger and more badass, and he got his butt kicked, which is how nature works out in the jungle.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest and strongest win.
Mhm.
Survival of the fittest physically tends to work out there.
Yeah.
Scar, even though he thought he was smarter than Mufasa,
He was.
Again, this dude was super arrogant, not likable at all. You're not going to be friends
was.
with Scar.
I would want to be friends with Scar.
He was.
You know who I don't want to be friends with? Mufasa and Simba, because they're like, hey, this is your kingdom, but stay in your place, zebra. Scar is like, you know what? No, you're with me, hyenas. Cool, we're all one. Get in where you
No,
fit
he
in.
was using the hyenas to get to be the king, and then once he got to be the king for a hot minute, it all goes to hell.
Yeah, because he hit a drought. It was bad timing. It was bad timing.
He had no idea about how the balance of the ecosystem worked. He didn't care as long as he was king. That's all he wanted to be.
He got his friends from the bottom to the top.
His friends. He was friends with. So he was friends with hyenas.
Yeah.
What about the giraffes, the elephants, the other
You mean the cogs that just stay in their place? This is
That-
America.
that were dying like crazy?
Opportunity.
With
It was
famine.
because of a drought.
And you know who likes people dying?
Who's
Hyenas. They're scavengers. They're scavengers.
Yeah, they are.
So if you just want a landscape of scavengers, yes, he did create a good,
Anarchy.
yes. And you know what Scar was? He was a little
What's Scar?
wimp.
He was smart. He was smarter than Mufasa.
He was a little wimp, and he needed people to die on their own so he could scavenge too.
You know, and this is all Simba's fault.
Oh my.
Simba was a jerk in this whole thing.
You know what? He was a little bit of a jerk, but he was a kid. We all make mistakes when we're kids.
Nah.
And he was manipulated by an adult who knew better.
He was smart.
Yes, smart and a jerk.
Slightly. Maybe
He's
you need a little
jerk.
bit of
He's
that.
a
in
bad
life.
guy. He's a bad guy.
He was a good guy.
He's a bad
Got a
guy.
bad rap.
There's no
Got
there's no
banished
denying
to
it.
this
Anyway.
to this barren wasteland
Yeah,
by
because
his
he's a jerk.
brother.
And because he throws the entire place out of balance once he gets a hot minute.
Yeah,
And then he doesn't care
drought.
about anything else. He's like, hey, bring me some more food.
Didn't he? If he had a meteorologist, if
Dude.
he would have known seasonal weather patterns, he
Dude.
would have been prepped. But he was not.
He was King John from Robin Hood. Basically just wanted to be king so he could be a jerk to everybody because he was a little wimp and he got, you know what? Nobody
You know
likes
what?
that.
Have fun and your Mufasa fairy tale.
You know
your
who-
cog.
You know
figure
who?
stay in your
You know who
lane.
came back? Simba. And he won. And everything became light and happy again.
Yeah, I don't like that messaging. You're stronger. You know, just keep on fighting. But if you're smarter, it doesn't pay off. I don't
also,
like that.
Also a good dude. He hung out with, Timon and Pumbaa for a while and didn't eat them.
Should have.
Friends. Anyway, that'll do it this week. Everyone have a great week.
We'll see you. Scar was a good guy. He was a good guy. Where's Marianne?
No, he didn't. I think he probably had work to do.
Where's Marianne?